Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. I want to thank you for joining me today. And today we have an episode that I thought a lot about, and I'm very excited actually to do it. And I'm interested to see, and I hope that the information is useful to people. So our episode today is a little bit focused on the personal ramifications of our practicing the joyful art of business and us focusing on surpassing our goals. So much of what we do in our shows and in our programs is focused on concrete outcomes. I'm constantly focused on outcomes because I'm a pragmatic person, and that's sort of the whole framework of how our programs, are structured. And this show, our topic is be of service. That's our topic. So here we are looking at the joyful art of business, and our topic is to be of service. In work, paid and or volunteer, and in life, with those you love or care about and who love or care about you, including yourself. Now, these types of topics, sometimes people say, well, how do you measure outcomes? How do you measure outcomes of being of service? It sounds like a nice thing, but, I'm a business person, or I'm worried about my professional development and success, and I'm all about making more money and achieving all my professional goals and financial goals. But my argument is, and that's what we're here to discuss in this show, my argument is that these are complementary and interrelated concepts. In other words, if I'm asking myself, what's holding me back from surpassing my goals? My goals cannot be solely one-dimensional. So if my goal only is, for example, to be in peak physical condition. So let's say that's my goal. My number one focus is peak physical condition. So I'm up every day at 4 a.m. and I'm in the gym, and I have a very impressive program that I'm working on my different muscle groups, and I'm developing and chiseling my body to its absolute perfection. And I'm having my eating program and my nutrition, and my whole entire focus is on my body. That's great. That's wonderful. But if that's all that is focused on, then what about the rest of the person? What about sort of a holistic approach? So you reach peak physical perfection, or close to it in your mind. Of course, perfection doesn't exist, and if it does, it's temporary. And a lot of people who are either professional athletes or people who are just very serious into fitness do this. They get to the certain body fat percentage that they wanted, they have the tone that they want, and this is something that makes them happy and gives them great joy. And I totally support it if it's in a healthy way, of course. The issue of our show, though, if that's all that somebody's focused on, right, is this sort of physical manifestation of these specific outcomes, and they reach that, but there's nothing else, right? So I'm not focused on the things that maybe bring me, joy in the rest of my life. I haven't focused on my emotional well-being, psychological well-being. I haven't focused on understanding the consequences of my interactions, either with other people or other entities in life. It's not enough. It never is, and that's why we can, the world is littered with stories of people who, they were the peak, right? They were the gold medalist. They were the number one champion. They were the best in the world, literally. That's what they were. They had that. They had earned that. And yet, if there's not this total approach to looking at all of the aspects, it's a 360, right? I'm doing a full circle at my life. I'm not just looking at the one part that maybe brings me the most reward in terms of outcome, but I need to look around the rest of my life. It tends not to be either a long-lasting or an effective way to look at your entirety of who you are as a person. So that's what this show is about. And the whole idea, be of service. Now, it's something that I talk about in my personal life to people. It's something that I feel, for me as an individual, is extremely helpful. And I think the first part of the episode, what we need to do is just sort of define, what on earth am I talking about? What's this be of service thing. What? Okay. So much of what we do in life, and we've done a show in the past that gave some statistics that we as individual humans think about 70,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. And a lot of those thoughts are about ourselves, which is totally understandable, right? Like, I'm hungry, or I have to go to the bathroom, or my stomach hurts, or what's that in my eye? Okay, those are normal things to think. The idea, though, is that if we only think about ourselves and our needs and our desires and our wants, that it can prevent us from surpassing some of the goals in terms of contributing to society, contributing to other people, and it also limits us from the ability to be enriched by other people. In other words, when I'm focused on myself, constantly me, right? I'm hungry, my stomach hurts, why didn't I do a better job at that work situation, or, whatever it is, me, then I'm not ever getting the opportunity to put myself within the larger context of other people and other systems, right, society. And I also am not giving myself an opportunity to take in other nurturing, powerful, helpful, and entertaining experiences from the world. In other words, when we're of service, of course, part of the idea is that I'm giving of myself. That's what I'm saying. I'm be of service. In what? Doing what? In any way that you can. You're being of service to someone else. So the whole idea is maybe the way of being of service is that you have some extra things that you look around in your place and you think, I don't really use that sweater. And you take it to a local, a charitable organization, a Goodwill or Salvation Army or something of that nature, and you donate it. Now, that may take just a few minutes. It's not maybe that big of a deal in the scheme of things, but you're being of service. You didn't have to do that. And it matters because those organizations, the ones that are credible in doing their work, somebody else somewhere doesn't have that and needs it. So it seems like maybe not a big deal, but you're starting, again, it's about outcomes. You're starting to do something, to act in a way that can positively impact other people. And believe it or not, there are, or you probably do, but there's a lot of studies that try to put, numbers and measurements on outcomes of being of service. So whether it's something that's a quote, a charitable or a volunteer type activity, the whole idea is that it does allow the person who's being of service to actually take in something that helps them too. It's a win-win, right? And, you can just think of it as any type of system, sort of from a physics or mathematical perspective, right? So you have a system and, and energy is moving through the system. And so it makes sense that if all I'm doing is I have a closed system and all I do is focus on me, right? And I'm never of service. I'm not sort of opening up my system to sort of, one, be of service. That's giving some of my energy to some other entity. But also I'm not allowing other people to contribute to my situation. And so we all have the ability and the capacity to learn from others. And it could be other people, it could be other places, it could be other experiences. We all have that ability and capacity. Nobody that I'm aware of that's ever lived knows everything and has reached some sort of point where there's nothing more to learn, nothing to give, and they're just, that's it. They're saturated. And so the whole concept is that I'm encouraging you to think about how can you be of service. Now, it might be, as I gave a little example, you have something you're not using and you contributed to an organization or a group or to a person or an entity that could use it. It might be that in your own daily life with your family, your friends, people that you interact with. Maybe there's someone that seems like that maybe they're a little down or you're not really sure. You could be of service by simply just asking someone, how are you? Tell me what's going on. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it is. How many people are in our world who really struggle because they perceive, and maybe it's the reality, that there's no one that sees them as a real person. There's no one that acknowledges their existence or cares in any way. And if you sometimes do something as simple as just saying to somebody, how are you? Tell me what's going on. It might seem like that's not a big deal, but that may have been the most positive experience that person had, that day or that month or even that, in the last couple of years. You don't know. You really don't know. Now, one of the reasons I think that this is an important show, it's an important topic, is I think sometimes because, of course, the focus of what my practice and my teaching, is so much of it is about, is business and these outcomes and law and outcomes and, and that's what I do. I mean, that's what I've studied, that's what I do, and that's what I'm interested in. I like it, right? Like, I'm interested in this stuff. I think it's fun and interesting. But it's not excluding. I think people might sometimes perceive, well, those are mutually exclusive, right? Like, all you're doing is out there focusing on all this kind of, business stuff and law stuff, but it's not related to the larger holistic picture of being of service, and I don't at all accept that. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the concept of the joyful art of business. One, that it's joyful, right? That it's not some drudgery, and that could, because a lot of people, whether they make minimum wage or they make millions, there are a lot of people who feel like they have to do something and they're stuck doing it and they're not happy. So what's the point in it? And I talk a lot about that, and a lot of times people get very, frustrated and say, well, look, I can't do anything else. And my argument always is, well, you could. It might not be easy. It might be difficult, but if you're miserable and you just are not having any positive emotional outcome, why are you in that position? The idea is that we are, we're organisms, and the healthiest, best part of that. So there's a physical part of it, as I was sharing earlier. Someone totally focused on, getting their physical measurements and outcomes to the best they can be. That's fantastic. In fact, more of us should focus on health in a healthy way. I mean, we've all seen these sort of nightmare scenarios where somebody gets way in an unhealthy way, and they, again, all things in moderation, and then it becomes abusive and unhealthy. So we're not talking about that. But of course, we're an organism, so there's a physical part to us. There's an emotional part to us. There's a psychological part to us. There's a community aspect to wherever we are in the world, and not stopping to take the spotlight off of us where it is most of the time. It's just sort of a function of it being our brain, and they sort of put the spotlight out around the world and ask, how can I be of service? It could be somebody in your house you live with, saying to them, what's going on? Hey, talk to me. That's not a big thing. It might not seem like it is, but it is. And like it could be going in your community and dropping off something that you don't need at a local group. It could be more substantial in terms of your time or investment. I had a fabulous opportunity to learn from some people just a few weeks ago. So I was on a work trip, and I was out of town, and some work colleague had invited me to spend some time in their home for dinner, and I did not realize what a powerfully uplifting and wonderful experience it would be, because the host, who I worked with for several years, and his wife had both been Peace Corps volunteers, and they started to share with me some of their experiences, and it just was so powerful. It was powerful. And they were sharing me, the places they'd gone and the things they'd done and the type of challenges that they'd lived with and the things they tried to do to help people. No, did they cure everything in the world? Of course not. And sometimes when people are not looking at the world from our perspective, the joyful art of any type of business or professional interaction, people say, what's it worth? What's the point of being of service? You can't change City Hall. These problems are overwhelming. I think there's a couple of things that are helpful for being of service. One of them is going to be a pretty somewhat selfish motivation. Having the capacity to get perspective on your individual life usually helps the individual. Having the ability to get perspective, right? It usually, not always, but it usually helps the individual. So what do I mean? Okay. So all of us have, super awesome days, sort of awesome days, and we have, horrible, not awesome days at all. And then we sometimes have days that are just literally unbearable. That's kind of life. I mean, that's life. And depending on where we were born in the world, which I argue we don't really control at all, and just sort of the randomness of kind of where we ended up on the planet, we're going to have different situations we deal with. So people in the States or in the U.S. are going to deal with different issues than somebody, you know, in Hong Kong. And somebody in Hong Kong has different issues than somebody in, you know, South Africa. And somebody in South Africa has different issues than somebody in, you know, Bolivia. That's just sort of some of it's, you know, just the geography of where you are, right? It might be too hot, too cold, who knows? It might be sort of the bigger cultural situations that your location faces. But we're all humans, and we all have the ability to sometimes be too focused on ourselves and not understanding that, yes, no matter what it is that's happened, we have problems. And those problems are real. And I argue all the time because it's, to the best of my ability, a great tool and technique, you know, perception's reality. So if I think I have a problem and it's real to me, then it's real. And somebody telling me it's not, you know, or that I'm being too sensitive or, you know, and a lot of things people sometimes will say, well, you know, how can you be upset about this when there's, you know, somebody in a war in some part of the world or somebody somewhere, you know, in some sort of starvation situation or some horrible natural disaster is happening? Of course, we all get that, right? But my argument is, as an adult, it does help to sometimes take yourself out of your own narrative and your own sort of me, and start to just put the spotlight in the world and get perspective. By being of service, you'll get perspective. Because just the act of opening up your time and your attention to some other thing, other person, other organization, it you know, that's taking time away from you. So I'm not able to sit and wallow in my, you know, disappointment about whatever my personal life if I'm somewhere in the middle of, you know, working on something to help somebody else. It's just, you know, I'm doing that. So while I'm helping, I'm busy on my task and activity, and now I didn't have the time to do my, you know, my pity party. So that's a somewhat selfish motivation, that being of service actually does usually help the person. Because most of the time we realize if we have the ability to be of service, then that meant we had resources. It may have only been that we had the time to turn to somebody and say, hey, how are you doing? Tell me what's going on. But that time is a luxury. You know, it's a luxury to be alive. It's a luxury and an opportunity to be able to communicate with other people, whether it's verbally or it's in writing or through sign language or any other method. It's a luxury to be able to have the maturity and the sophistication to be able to ask someone. So, yeah, that's a resource. Time is a huge resource. In fact, you know, arguably our most important one, because it's the only one that no matter what we do in life, we can't change, right? We might extend maybe our natural life. We might do some things that might help us in terms of, you know, preventing or mitigating or warding off some maybe health issues, but we're all on the clock. And giving what you have that's extra is being of service. So it could be time. It could be just compassion. That's the thing about asking somebody, what's going on? That's compassion. Because it's not about you. You're not being paid for it, right? You're just asking them. And then you follow through and you literally listen to it, whatever it is. And we all know our journeys in life just by being an adult. Especially, for example, here's an easy one. You talk to a young person. Let's say you're talking to somebody, I don't know, in 5th grade, somebody around 10 years old. When you talk to somebody about that age, you know, and you're obviously an adult, their world is really important to them. And if there's something that's upset them or stressful, maybe at work, maybe at school, which is their work, you know, who's set by somebody in the cafeteria or what happened in class. These things may sound sort of silly and somebody might say, oh, what's the deal? It's a little kid, you know, who cares? But to that person, it's their whole world. And we all know when we've read and observed, and some of us in our own lives have experienced, that people, even at very young ages, can be in such a situation where they feel so out of options that they engage in either self-harm or harm other people. So it's real. So just taking the time to listen, you might not think, wow, you know, I understand it exactly. I haven't been maybe 10 years old in a long time, you know, but it doesn't mean that you can't have compassion and listen. It's not what happened, it's how the person feels about what happened, right? So if they're telling you a story and they're 10 years old and telling you that somebody who they normally sit with, didn't want to sit with them, that's not the point. The point is how they felt about it. Were they hurt? Were they embarrassed? Did they feel rejected? What's going on? And listen. So that's being of service. Your time, your attention, your compassion. That's being of service. Most of the time you don't have to even say anything, right? It's just the listening and the looking and, or eye contact or giving verbal cues that you're listening. Yeah, that's all you have to do because it validates the other person's experience, which validates them. And that's powerful. So we can be of service for no money, just with a little bit of time, a little bit of compassion. We can be of service to people that are in our closest circle in life, or we can be of service to somebody who's a total stranger. We can be of service if we have more resources in terms of time or finances. A lot of people who have built up a good amount of financial resources do give. They give to charitable organizations. They give money. And a lot of people give time. There's no marker for this. Now, some people take something that should be healthy, being of service, and they turn it into some sort of negative spotlight back on them again, right? So then they want to make it a competition or they want to brag about all the things that they did, which is the whole, and then it just becomes another one of these me things. And that's the whole, purpose of being of service is literally you're just going to be of service for the act itself. So it's not about you. So when that happens, of course, then somebody's sort of perverted the process. It's the same thing. Again, the analogy earlier, somebody, really focused on fitness or healthy or taking care of themselves, that's great. Some people go so far, they become abusive of their bodies, right? Because they take it and it becomes an unhealthy situation where they've hurt themselves, with this excessive or inappropriate behavior. And it's the same thing with the idea of being of service. It's the value of being of service is it itself, and it's not about you. That's the whole point. And people come to the concept of being of service from so many perspectives. There's so many religious perspectives, and almost every religion I'm aware of has the idea of being of service. Now, how you're of service or what types of things you do to be of service, again, doesn't really matter. It does, whether you just have a little bit of time and you talk to someone, or you listen to them. Mostly it's the listening. If you have some financial resources and maybe you donate or give to a person or an organization, that's of service. If you have a specific religious or spiritual focus, fine. If you have an ethical focus or framework, fine. It does, to me, this isn't about how you're of service or how much you're of service. Again, this isn't about you. This is about the concept of giving, of just giving. Because so much of what we do in our lives is structured that we're not. We're in our own narrative, right? And a lot of that is totally normal. You're thinking about yourself, You have to, because you got to figure out, am I hungry? Am I sleepy? Where am I supposed to go? What am I doing, right? Like that, you have to think about yourself because you're the only one in there, And all this is the argument that if you only focus on one or two issues in life, and if you only focus inwardly, that you're not going to be able to achieve any contentment or any lasting contentment. And my argument is that sometimes we don't prioritize being of service. Being of service should not be a negative. This isn't, again, a competition. Sometimes I'll think to myself, I'm not doing enough, right? I should do more volunteer work or put more volunteer hours in, or I should, find more ways to give and but that's just part of, I think, my nature, right? Like I'm always going to, at some level, go through and think, am I doing enough? I mean, but I also realize that, look, there's no measurement on this. And I also realize that just the idea of giving, whether it's time or attention or compassion or any other resource, it is powerful. And it doesn't have to be a person. It could be any type of entity. It could be, an animal group or, anything. It just means that you're giving of yourself. And the idea that you're not doing it for money, and the idea that you're not doing it for you, but you're just doing it just to do it. Now, I mentioned that, there are good incomes that come to you by giving, because you're going to open yourself up to this interaction, and you almost always are going to learn something. You're going to learn something from the other people you talk to. You're going to learn something from the animals that you're working with. You're going to learn something that you didn't know. And that doesn't hurt. Taking in new information never hurts. And also it takes us out of our own narratives, especially if we're in a negative place or frame of mind. And I don't know if it's something that, again, that we prioritize. And this is, again, a healthy situation. So this isn't something, I'm not saying be of service as part of some group, right? Like, oh, I'm in a social group or something, and I have to have so many, credits to get of service to be able to, join the group or move up in the group or whatever. I'm not talking about that because, again, that's all about you. I'm talking about literally these things that are the giving without the focus on the getting what's in it for you. So, again, it could be just a little bit of time. I think it could be something as simple as sometimes when I'm out at the grocery store or running errands and I'm just talking to somebody maybe who works there, I try to ask them legitimately, not just a fake, how are you, but, how's your day-to-day? Is it busy? What's going on? And I compliment them. Oh, that's a nice hairdo, or wow, that's a great tie. Why am I doing this? You know what? Some people in life have a very low-stress, wonderful, bountiful life. And they just have all of the love and attention and resources and finances that, you could ever imagine. And that's a wonderful place for them to be. I hope, as long that I continue to try to, move in that direction in my life as much as I can. But some people don't. A lot of people struggle. And a lot of people really struggle. And not just sort of the idea of the worst case scenario, there's a war-torn region of the world, there are people that are in, a refugee camp. Yes, that's a very, very tangible. But there are people in your own community. I guarantee you, wherever you live right now. And that's why stopping to just say something nice to somebody or smile, even if they think you're some weirdo. Why is that lady smiling? I don't know. Who cares? And a little compliment, it again validates people, and it helps them feel like, hey, and you know what? That may be the only nice thing that somebody said to somebody all day or all week or all year for all you know. So I don't have a specific program that I would recommend. I would argue that you should be of service in somewhere that you enjoy or you're interested in. I also think you should stretch yourself and try to learn new things. I think that remembering that giving is an important, and I'm going to argue a required part of surpassing your goals. I don't care what the other goals are. If you never give, then you sort of create these closed systems, and it tends to not allow in new information or experiences. You also don't have the perspective that you gain from giving, because every time you give, you're going to learn something that you didn't know, and you're going to think, wow. And often you're going to think, okay, I've been upset about something in my life, but I hadn't thought about this other situation. And now that I've learned about it or I'm aware of it, wow, I'm appreciative of something in my life. And that is sort of the point. It's difficult, it's not impossible to be joyful if you don't have any gratitude. And many people of all different backgrounds all over the world that I've met and worked with are just not grateful. They're just angry. And, sometimes when you listen and understand, it makes sense. But the reality is that if we were never able to have even a moment of sort of breathing and feeling, okay, maybe there's one good thing, right? Maybe I had a good bowl of soup, or I had a nice nap, or my stomach doesn't hurt. Those are good things. And the more you can get out there in the world and be of service, the more you'll be able to have reflections on things that you might be a little bit appreciative of in your own life. And that's a healthy thing. I really appreciate you joining me for this show and this episode. Again, I encourage you, I implore you to think about how you can do something today. Again, something as simple as saying to somebody, hey, how are you? Tell me what's going on, and then listening. Or just saying to somebody that is a stranger, hi, nice tie. Your hair looks great. Yeah, maybe they think you're a little weird, but that's okay. That's okay. Thank you for joining me. As always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com, and I really appreciate you for being part of this program. Thank you.